BMW had the same goal that 11-year-old John Stockton had, which was growth. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to what is possibly the most coveted of the E36 M3s, the BMW M3 GT, only sold in Europe. This might be the fanniest of the fanboy cars. That sounds like it's about butts. A lot of people wish we'd gotten the Euro motor in America when it comes to the E36 M3. And this is a step above that. We're going to explain all of the things about it. Questions we're going to answer in this video are: what is the M3 GT? Should we be jealous that Europe got it and we didn't? And how is it different from the car that we did get? What is it? The M3 GT was made as a homologation car. So they made 356 of these. They were all coupes. They were all left-hand drive. They all came out in 1995. They were made to get the car homologated for FIA racing, IMSA racing, other endurance series like that. The car did well in those series. Homologation is a good thing. It usually means that the car you're driving on the street has race car bits, technology, engineering in it, and it's going to usually be the best version of that car. All right, so like I said, they made 356 of these. All of them came in this British racing green. All of them had the same 5-speed transmission, the same hardware, the same software, etc. The engine is a 3-liter S50 engine. It makes 295 horsepower and 238 pound-feet of torque at 3,900 RPM. Got a little bit of a power bump over the rest of the European M3s thanks to higher compression, different cams, and of course a tune to make that all work. Other differences between the M3s in Europe: you had different suspension, shocks and springs, a front strut tower brace. The car also, if you couldn't tell, has different aero than the cars we got in America. It had a front splitter that's adjustable. You can slide it in and out like a drawer. And then the rear wing is adjustable, but only in terms of height. There's some spacers you can put on if you want that full LTW GT3 Techademics style wing on it. The owner of this car doesn't like having it on there because he says it doesn't make it, it's not street legal. I mean, rear visibility is still compromised with this wing, but if it was taller, it would be worse. You also got clear indicators, some different, more aerodynamic mirrors, and then, of course, this interior, which has this awesome Mexico green leather. This is all Alcantara, and you have carbon fiber trim here and there. What's weird about the carbon fiber trim is it seems to just be stuck on top of the normal trim the car came with, and as you'll see in these shots, it's peeling up and cracking in these places. This car has like 120,000 miles on it. It's a driver's car. There's a little bit of wear on the door cards, on the seats. You know, this is not a museum quality thing. This is not an EAG car. The gentleman, Jason, who was kind enough to let me drive it, he imported it from Europe. It's one of only a few that are actually in the United States, and this one shows signs of being used thoroughly. Those are the specs. We'll do the rest while we're driving. There is quite a shove right there at 5,500 RPM. It feels like VTEC. It is a shelf of torque that arrives, or power rather. And then it pulls, oh man. So red line, 7,000 RPM. I think peak power is at 6,000, and you really, really feel it. With the windows down, I will say, those ITBs are much more noticeable. It's got a really sweet sound to it. And but now with the windows up, all I hear is that induction sound. Cyclist. Yeah, that's right. He raised the sunglasses because he was like, is that really an E36 GT? It is. So as I said, they built 356 of these. Very rare car. Was not imported to the US at any point. Meant for to homologate the car for racing. That's usually a good thing. It was a good thing with Porsche. It was a good thing with Lancia Delta Integrale and Subaru and all these other cars. But let's take it back a little bit. Let's talk about what the M3 was. E30 M3, of course, was also a homologation car. BMW wanted to go racing, and they wanted to do well, and they did. But the problem is that they didn't sell that well in the United States. They were very expensive. They weren't that fast in a straight line, and I think it was just hard to convince the public to buy that car. So with the E36, BMW had the same goal that 11-year-old John Stockton had, which was growth. They wanted to sell more cars. That meant keep the price respectable, give it a bit of a power bump, etc., etc. So the inline-6 in this, in my opinion, is just more true to BMW. It's more enjoyable to drive. It makes more torque. You don't have to rev it out as high as the E30. I get it. The E30 was the first one. It's very important because of that. But this engine is just more usable, and I just prefer the way it feels to an inline-4. So they turn everything up a bit, right? They give it this different hardware. They give it more power. It's got some aerodynamic changes that are all adjustable, and it's very rare. They did make fewer lightweights. The lightweight, of course, is kind of like the consolation prize we got here in America. We were all complaining that we didn't get the good engine that they got in Europe, which had 282 horsepower, and then eventually like 320 when they changed to a 3.2 liter. So with the lightweight, it was 200 pounds lighter, still had the same 240 horsepower engine, and then of course it had that paint job, which looks like a checkered flag went to a rave and then just collapsed on top of the hood. I've never been that into the lightweight because it has a lot of the same problems that the regular US M3s do, which is the interiors fall apart and doesn't have that much power, but they're really, 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 really expensive. But this car was important. You know, BMW went racing and they won. They won some endurance races. They escape me right now. I'll put them in a lower third right here. And I'm going to close this sunroof. You know, and the M3 was built as a sedan, convertible, and coupe. They actually raced a sedan, and when they won, they put a taxi sign on top of it, which is super cool. This car only came as a coupe. It only came as left-hand drive. It was just very specifically meant to do one thing. So how's it drive? Well, the steering, I'm having to recalibrate my brain to 30 years ago, basically. The steering, as you can see, has a lot more play that doesn't really affect the front wheels. It's just the ratio is much wider, much taller than a modern rack. You know, these modern sports cars, I mean, through all of these canyons, you're basically doing 90 degrees of lock in either direction. In this, I feel like I could be doing some hand over hand for hairpins. The steering's not super communicative. It's hydraulic, I know, and we often sing the praises of hydraulic steering compared to new electric systems, but that doesn't mean all hydraulic steering was really good. I mean, this has the same lazy center steering that my E46 has, E36s have had. And then once you start to lean on the tire a little bit in a corner, I'll show you, you know, it's not like I'm feeling this super direct, rigid connection. I can feel the front tires, but it's not really sharp. It feels like it's a little bit muffled, if you will. Brakes, this has stock brakes. They are good. You know, they're not going to stop you from 70 and 100 feet like a new M3 comp, but for the time, they're fine. What I found most interesting is the suspension. You know, this car has stiffer shocks and springs than the regular car. And again, I have to recalibrate because it's leaning more than I expect from, you know, something that has M3 plus extra letters, like the new M3 comp. Really rigid, lots of turning. It's the sign of the times. So this, it has more of that lean, you know, the body motion. Everything is a little bit slower. I mean, but it is a sweetheart. It is a sweetheart. And then we get in the power. Let's get in the power. $6,000. Wow. As I've said before about other cars, not many of them, this engine feels frictionless. I mean, it starts pulling harder about 5,800, and then it just really, like, it does not let up until 7. It really doesn't. There's no drop off. That is really cool. All right, we're gonna take it on some tighter stuff now, because I want to see what the agility is like. Because something I've loved about these cars is the versatility. The E36, I mean, they raced it a lot. People still race them a lot in Lemons and Chump Car and everything. I mean, it is such a good platform. It's good for drifting. It's good for rally. It's a good daily. I mean, it really is a super versatile car, and that's why they're so popular. All right, see that right there? I'm at about 80 degrees of turn, 80 degrees of lock. Man, and then it just hums. It really just hums up to redline. I had to look down to notice I was nearing redline right there. I had no idea because the engine's tone doesn't really change that much. And that's not a knock against the engine sound itself. It's just these things always feel like they just want to rev. They really do. I gotta say, I'm smiling more than I expected to. You know, I was reading all the specs of this car. It was like, okay, it's not gonna be super fast. It's not crazy different from the ones they sold here. It's not like it had a supercharger or, I don't know, $20,000 Öhlins or something like that. It's tuned up in a lot of little places. It's improved in a lot of little places, but that's usually how a special version from an OEM is, right? Like the 911R or the regular GT3. Well, the GT3 gets a special engine. That was a bad example. It's more like the STI 209. You know, everything just gets turned up a little bit, but the sum of all that is a car that does have a different character than the car it's based on. I just can't believe how rare these are. I mean, I know they only made about 130 lightweights, but all of them were sold here. You know, that was the consolation prize, but none of these were sold here. 0. So I better be careful with it. I mean, it's a high miles version, but that doesn't mean it's cheap. You know, ergonomically, these are not the best cars. Like the steering wheel goes up and down, but it doesn't telescope. I feel like I'm sitting a little bit too high. I'm a little too close to the pedals, but if I back up anymore, I'll be too far away from the wheel. And then, of course, there's the problems these had in terms of the interior is kind of falling apart. This one's actually holding together really well. There's no sag in the headliner or anything, but you know, the E36 is known for that. But just as a platform, good car, good car. Fun fact about that spoiler, if you drive it fast enough for long enough, it will actually put so much pressure on the rear trunk that it'll break the trunk latch. Yeah. BMW, planning its own demise since, whatever, 1907. The cars are so wonderful, but they do truly eat themselves, right? They're either too complicated or the interiors fall apart and they break their own trunk. But all in the name of speed. All in the name of speed. Yes, the E46 costs a lot of money, but it goes fast, damn it, so it's justified. All right, so to the last question of should we be jealous that we didn't get this car? Well, I think yes and no. You know, from an investment standpoint, I totally understand it. A car that is homologated for racing is always going to be worth more than a car that wasn't. It's going to be connected to the racing pedigree, it's going to be connected to motorsport, and that usually A, means the car is going to be good, and B, it means the car is it's a good selling point. It's a good marketing point. But as a driving experience, I don't think we should be that jealous of the Europeans. I mean, for one, in 1995, Car and Driver tested a 96 M3, and it ran to 60 miles an hour quicker than the advertised time of both this and the European M3. So we got a car that was basically as quick. Our cars had a little bit more torque, and in 96 they changed the final drive ratio from 315 to 323, which helped acceleration. So you can kind of get the acceleration factor you want. Handling, I mean, look, in 95, this probably outhandled the regular car we got, but right now, I mean, it's leaning over a little bit. It doesn't feel really stiff. It doesn't feel super agile. So you could go to the aftermarket and give, you know, whatever reputable company you want, I don't know, $2,000 to $4,000 and get a set of suspension, coilovers from KW or something that would make your regular US M3 more agile, more responsive than this car. I've driven a sedan that had a half cage and TC Klein stuff on it, and it was way sharper than this car. But to say that is not a knock against this car. I don't think people are wrong for wanting this, because the M3 sold so well in America and around the world and is so popular that it almost suffers from its own success, where it's pretty common. So if you buy an E36 M3, doesn't even matter how many doors it has, and you pull into a car show or go to a track day, there's gonna be 5 of your friends or 5 of your siblings sitting there with the same car. And, you know, for some people, like, that's kind of a bummer. People want their car to be special. They want to be a little bit more unique, you know, and I totally get that. But what I'm trying to say is that I feel like for a long time, we've talked about the forbidden fruit cars, whether it's a Ford, a BMW, whatever, and we've looked at them of like, why couldn't we have that? And yes, there's some circumstances where we really wish we had, but with this, the US cars get 90% of the way there. You know, what makes this car great is not the parts that were added to it, it's the bones and DNA underneath. It's not like we're talking about, you know, in 2002, Nissan sold an R34 GTR in Japan, but we got the Murano. It's not like that. Like, we got 80 to 90% of this car in America. So I get why these are special, and rarity usually results in price and appreciation, both figuratively and literally. But if you have an E36 or you talk about them or you're interested in them, and you're always looking at these like, yeah, but we didn't get the one. Like, we got enough of it. We got enough of it. So so I want to thank Jason, or Instagram at M3 Curator, for letting me drive this car, because while I am saying that the regular cars are almost as good, this is still special. It still has that racing connection, and it's still a very unique car, especially in America. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening to the podcast, all those other things. It supports us a lot. And have fun driving. See you later.
And remember, always fight your tickets. Use code TST10 on the Off the Record app, available in the Android and iOS store, or go to offtherecord.com/TST.